I'm hopeful, regardless of the outcome. Boost the positive energy without one. Sorry about the jab, I'm on a holy field. I'm bearing fruit, but demons try to eat them like Yoshi meals. Piss them off the Batman like Falcone deals. Jungle full of predators, I know how Mowgli feels. So I got the fire, refuse to live in fear. I can spot suppliers, eating fresh rolls. Call me private label, I be leaving bread.
Oh yeah, welcome to episode 250 of the Permaculture Pimpcast, where PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion. The only Pimpcast on planet Earth where we discuss permaculture, preparedness, and practical living. Folks, we're really going to have a ballin' episode tonight because I got one of my heroes on board. And I think, and folks, I'm telling you, with all the dumb stuff going on in the world right now, you are going to be glad you tuned in tonight. But before we get down to it, this episode, as always, brought to you by Hickory Ridge Soap from TwoOldCrowsHomestead.com. Turn that simp into a pimp. Bam! Heaven's Harvest, 10% off with promo code PERMA. Handle all your preparedness needs yourself. Anything you can't source, go check them out. Plus, they got some ballin' seeds. And remember, we were batting 1,000 on those. And if you want to tip a pimp, do it over there in the Fountain app. Listen to all your podcasts over there and even triple up the speed. Redemption Shield. Right now, I got my bare feet. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you right now in the live chat. You see these dogs? They're sitting right here in this redemption grounding mat because I'm G'd up from the feet up. You know how it goes right here at the Billy's Jungle Palace of Love. And check this out, y'all. EMP Shield, $50 off with promo code PERMA. Look, we can go all day about what an EMP will or won't do, but your number one threat is lightning. As a journeyman electrician with 27 years experience in the IBEW, I can tell you right now that there is not a better transient voltage surge suppressor on the market than EMP Shield, and plus you can put them on your house. Look, their guarantee is so ironclad that if anything gets past that EMP Shield and Kentucky fries anything in your house, they're going to cover you for 25 G's. Find me somebody else that will give you that kind of coverage. Yeah, the EMP Shield might be cool, but the lightning protection is much, much better, and you can get $50 off with promo code PERMA. And don't forget about Harvest Right freeze dryers. All right, y'all, if you're just coming in a live chat right now, please hit that thumbs up. It helps us out greatly. Folks, I've been really looking forward to this. And in fact, with the hurricane and all the other dumb stuff that went on around here lately, I've been wanting to get my next guest on for a while. Now, if you don't know who he is, it's Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. He's one of my heroes in the space and somebody I've looked up to for a long, long time. And look, folks, I'm just going to tell you straight off. You're going to be glad you tuned in because I got a couple of questions for Jack that maybe he may not see coming, but you know, he is as agile in conversation as anybody as you're ever going to find. And then another cool thing about him that he's never going to tell you is that every single time he's the smartest man in the room, but he never feels the need to tell you about it. So he's very humble. He's wicked smart, and you're going to be glad you tuned in tonight. So with that, let's go to my man, Jack. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me, Billy, and that's probably a better introduction than I deserve.
No, in fact, that was rather humble. He's a rather, folks, I mean, I'm just giving you the very small cliff notes. I mean, my man is also a formidable autodidact. He's taught me so much, and folks, he's going to teach you a lot tonight too, but he's got some stuff that, honestly, I'm not only a friend of his, I'm also a student because a lot of what's going on right now in Western North Carolina. Okay, let me just kind of back up a little bit. The other day we had Alan Booker in town. Mm-hmm. We got him to come up here and, basically he's one of, he works with Jack as well. Now, in a nutshell, and Jack, you're going to see how this all ties together because you've actually done a lot of the groundwork for the stuff that we need to do up here in Western North Carolina to remediate a lot of the dumb stuff that's going on. So in a nutshell, folks, here's now I'm simplifying this, but folks, I'll get into greater detail in later episodes. But in a nutshell, here's what's got to happen alongside the river where all these crazy toxins or everything else are going. Okay. First thing that's got to happen is we got to put down some compost extract just to beat back the dumb stuff that's already going in there. Okay. Now we're getting into the winter months, so we can't plant anything immediate, or maybe we can. We'll find out from Jack here in a little bit. We're getting into the winter months. So after we put that compost extract down, guess what we're going to do next? Well, Jack is also an expert in something called biochar. That needs to go down, but we're going to charge it up first with a bunch of microorganisms because biochar is basically going to provide a whole lot of apartments for all those microorganisms. Then after the microorganisms that we put in that biochar that goes down, we're going to cover it up with some carbon and then hit it with compost extract all through the winter. Now, the reason why and then when we get into the growing months, and we're going to talk about putting in cover crops and then all the things that help remediate a lot of the dump stuff that's going on out there. But before all of that happens, y'all, we got to get testing. And I'm happy to report that a lot of that is going on this week. I'm not going to go into any details. I'll let you know after we get the results. So with all that said, Jack, believe it or not, y'all, has done classes. I'm talking like extreme awesome classes on everything I just talked about right now. And we're going to get into some of that today. So Jack, before we even get into the brass tacks, man, it's election night. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but people are going to hang me out to dry if I don't ask Jack Spirko what are his prognostications of doom.
Okay. All right. All right.
Before we even get into
we were talking about cover crops, but okay. Election prediction is Trump probably wins. Prediction for tonight is no one probably knows. Feet dragging as much as anything else. And when it's pretty obvious or officially announced, there's probably going to be rioting in the streets. And if you live in a large city, get away. Okay, there's going to be riots. There's pallets of bricks being dropped off in places. They're going to throw a tantrum. That's what I see happening. And then there's, I think there's more people predisposed to violence on the left and the right by like 10-1. That doesn't mean there's nobody predisposed to violence on the right. And I think if somehow Cackles wins, then you have a pretty good opportunity for some real upset people on the other side that feel like they got cheated again. And I don't know that they're going to want to be able to stand for it, because I do think there was some. A lot of people say that Trump won 2020. I don't know, because every serious allegation that was brought up was ignored. So like there's no confidence in the election, and that's very dangerous in a democracy or a republic that is a representative democracy. And so I think you're going to see chaos. No matter what happens, you're going to get chaos. And it's actually probably going to be a bigger impact on your life to focus on what you do in your backyard, how you educate your children, or in our case, like our grandchildren, than any of this stuff, right? So listen to us, not to just pimp what we're doing, but listen to us tonight, because you won't know by the time we're done, they still won't know anything. So just stick with us, have a beer or whatever your beverage of choice is, and enjoy the evening.
Yeah,
we'll do what we can to give you some education that will actually do something for you in your life.
I'm not going to say another word about it, Jack. I mean, that's exactly how I feel about it as well. Nothing changes in my life, no matter how this thing goes down. We prepare for these things, and folks, that's another reason why you want to go check out the Survival Podcast. If you haven't yet, if you're not a subscriber there, you definitely want to check it out, because Jack has covered from as far back as I know, 2008. Everything you can possibly think about in the preparedness realm. And his tagline, man, I live by it. It's a way to live if times get tough, or even if they don't. And so, yeah, he preps you for all of this stuff. And to be honest with you, folks, it should be part of your preparedness. I'm dead serious. So check it out. That's all we're going to talk about concerning the elections, because that's really
don't get upset, right? We have to say something.
Yeah, we got to say something. I mean, and that's about as far as I'm going to go with it. I said all I'm going to say about it last night. We about burned up the internet when I said I wrote in my own name. Okay,
I got a story.
Yeah.
It's quick. It's a 1-minute story. When I was 19, I believe it was 19 or 20, and Bush was running against Clinton, old man Bush and Clinton, and I was in the Army. I got my my absentee ballot. They send you when you're in the service. And I was like, I don't really want either one of these people. So I wrote my own name in. And my buddy, this dude named Ramos, who was actually my squad leader, is like, well, who'd you vote for, man? And I told him, I said, like, I voted for me. So he comes back like the next day and he goes, I did the same thing you did, man. I'm like, you voted for yourself? He goes, no, I voted for you. I'm like, why? He goes, I voted for you. I told all the guys, I got 38 votes in the 1992 election or 1990, I guess it was 1990, 92 election. I got 38 votes for president. I was kind of afraid like the commander was going to call me and go, dude, what's going on? But apparently secret ballot really is secret ballot.
Well, it's crazy, man, how much our lives overlap in so many different ways. We both were raised in Pennsylvania. We were both in the 82nd Airborne. We were both We both lived in exactly the same places. It's crazy. And we're both in the podcasting realm today. We're both permaculture designers. I mean, in my family, bro, you only know who your dad is because your mom told you. We may even be
Just to be clear, I was never
know.
in the 82nd. I was airborne. I was with the 508th in Panama for a while, but I was airborne. But I never got to serve with the 82s.
Oh man, well, hey, bro, I would have traded you any day because Panama was one of those places when I was thinking about where I wanted to retire. I kid you not, Panama. Man, I love Fort Sherman so much, man. Down in Jungle School, and then Cologne, right across the canal there in Panama City. And then when I was seeing how these
at JOTC, and we're pretty sure we drank beer together at Fort Clayton's NCO Club.
Oh yeah,
100%, but we're pretty sure based on some discussions.
Yeah, too many overlaps. Well, Jack, let's just jump right into it. Hey, folks, once again, hit that thumbs up. Let everybody know that we're live so they can start suppressing us immediately. Because we're going to talk about things that really matter and not this nonsense, this pablum that they're shoving down your throats through the mainstream prostitute media. So, Jack, right off the bat, why don't you tell everybody what a cover crop is?
Sure. And I've got a deck down there that I can kind of page through if you want to bring it up, that I can do some things with. I don't really need it for this, but why not? We give some people some interesting things to look at. A cover crop is basically anything that you grow primarily to improve the soil or improve the results of the crop that will follow it. You don't really grow it for yourself. You certainly can, but you don't have to. But that's really what you're doing. You're growing it for the next rotation of crop, and we do this because basically, most of what you've been told about how to improve soil is wrong. So what they tell you to, I'm thinking get in the mind of a farmer versus like a gardener or like small scale market farmer. Now think broad acre farming. What do they tell you? They tell you that like when you grow your crop and you do it for several seasons, the best thing you can do eventually is rest the land, let it go fallow, right? Well, the
worst thing you can do.
That's the worst thing you can do because plants are carbon machines. They pull carbon out of the atmosphere and they put it in the soil. And, you're not going to get any lectures from me about, global warming or any crap like that. But I do believe that the land we're growing our food on should have a minimum of 2% carbon and probably should be more in the neighborhood of 4 to 6%. And the average farm right now, including small farms, is in the neighborhood of 0.5% carbon. And carbon's an interesting thing because it's a kind of a higher level element. So we can't make it. We either have it or we don't. So every single atom of carbon that will ever be on Earth, unless we get hit like an asteroid that has carbon in it, is here now. You could only make carbon from lower elements in a fusion reactor like a star. So if we're going to put more carbon in the soil, there's really only one place for us to get it, and that's out of the atmosphere. Right? So if you want the carbon to go in the soil, the number one way that happens is that plants through photosynthesis interact with soil organisms, and they literally are carbon delivery pumps, and they pump carbon in the soil. So when you let that land go fallow, basically woody shrubbery weeds will grow, crappy weeds will grow. You don't have any control over them, and you don't get the kind of coverage you need in land that's been historically farmed that will allow you to actually improve the soil before the next crop comes. All you've done is really rested it a bit, and maybe you've captured a little bit of organic matter and what have you, but you have no control over the situation. And so if instead we take to the process of whenever we're not growing something, whenever that time is, whether it's through the winter or through the summer, spring, fall, whenever that works for you in your rotation, that this bed or this particular plot is not producing anything, you plant something that's designed to improve the soil, your next crop will do better and you will lower your input requirement. That's kind of the basics of it.
Man, that's what I'm talking about. It's amazing that everybody's taught the polar opposite. Just let it go fallow or just put a bunch of trash bags over it. Or, the thing now is, just, hey, grab a silage tarp, put it out there. Well, Jack, how long have people been using these things? I mean,
let me go back to the first problem. I do have that question, or you don't have the answer. This goes back. Oh, I actually do have the answers. Washington and Jefferson wrote letters to each other lamenting that early Americans were not using enough of them. We have records from China and India that go back thousands of years of cover crops being used. And really, if you go back before there was chem ag, you either covered or you moved. Like this was like the slash and burn model of agriculture was because some of the civilizations doing it didn't understand what a cover crop was. They didn't know. So they would slash an area, they would burn everything off. That would give them a boost, kind of just like, in a way, it's very similar to the boost we get when we plow.
Right.
And then that would give them a boost, and they'd be able to grow for 3 or 4 seasons. In some climates, maybe 7. And at some point, like, you just don't get really the yield you're looking for anymore. So they would just abandon it, let it go fallow, and move. But they didn't let it go fallow for a season. Whatever that rotation was, they pretty much let it go fallow for that. So if they were in a climate where it took 7 years before you burned it up, they let it go at least 7 years before they came back because the next plot lasted that long.
Right.
And before we had John Deere, right? Before we had all these mechanized stuff, and you had people like out there like behind one ox pushing a plow, one farmer could only deal with so big of a plot of land anyway. So historically, you either covered or you moved. So that tells you that basically agriculture's been around 10,000 years. So we've probably been using cover crops for almost that long.
Well, Bill Mollison has even talked about, even in the designer's manual, about that very thing, where even in some of these indigenous cultures in South America, that it was usually the exploit and move strategy. And then by the time they came back around, I mean, it might have been a whole generation.
It could have been way longer than 7 to 10 years. That's in an area that was controlled, right? Like
absolutely.
In the forest, like this is a totally different, especially if you get into like rainforests, tropical systems. Those soils are, people think that they're incredibly fertile systems. They're not.
Mm-mm.
They're incredibly fragile systems, right? Yeah. So like if you actually go into the rainforest, like when we were talking about Panama earlier, you go to like Panama, Costa Rica, you get on a triple canopy. You have all this leaf litter because these trees, even though they're not deciduous in that they don't have a winter where everything drops, they're constantly dropping debris. You pull that debris back and you'll literally see roots sticking up out of the ground because the soils are so minerally deficient. They're taking the minerals from that detritus.
That's right.
So here, you know, in temperate climates where we're more blessed than we realize, our trees want to go as deep as they can into that subsoil and mine as many minerals as they can. If you think about it, if we pronounced vitamins and minerals the same way, right? The British say vitamins and minerals, right? One of my British friends told me when I mocked him for saying vitamins, he said, right, you say minerals? And I said, well, maybe we should. Because that's the root of the word, right? It's you're mining minerals from the, what do you call it when you buy a property? If you have the rights to the resources in the land, you call them mineral rights, right? So in our climates, I assume most people listening to this, minerals are deep. In the rainforest, man, it's just straight clay all the way down. It's a wet desert is a way to look at it. That's and right. So those folks, they might go 100 years before they came back to that spot until they discovered things like biochar, right? And midden-style gardening.
Right. Well, speaking of gardening, you know, there are so many, we have record numbers right now, as you well know. In fact, Joel Salatin, his latest book was the Homesteading Tsunami. We have record numbers getting into this space right now. Now, you'd never know it because, honestly, the numbers of people that are actually doing things like Jack's talking about on YouTube right now are largely being suppressed. I mean, unless you want to go out there and say, buy these 5 things or you're going to die, the algorithms don't necessarily favor you. But so many gardeners or people say the gateway drug in the homesteading is chickens. I disagree. I think it's gardening.
It's gardening.
Low barrier to entry in the whole 9 yards. So do gardeners need to be exploiting cover crops?
Need versus would they be better off is the way I like to frame it. So do you need to do it? So, I mean, I want to show, I think I have a slide here that'll show this. This is Kansas in 2023 on the left there. Okay, that's when we get into large scale farms, they need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I took that picture and I turned it black and white instead of color, and I sent you that, and I said, Billy, when do you think this picture is from? You would say the 1930s. That's the Dust Bowl.
Absolutely.
Right? That's last year. And this is how farms start out. They go in and they plow. They turn that soil up, and it looks so pretty for like a couple weeks. And then they go in and they plant, you know, these monocrops, corn, beans, whatever. And the next thing that happens is in the spring, you get wind. Any fisherman knows, like, spring's a great time to fish, except the wind sucks, right? So you get the wind, and this dust cloud kicks up, and it blows all of that top layer of soil away. And then once that settles down, everybody's seen what's on the other side of the screen. I know some of you guys are audio only, but let me try to describe it for the audio only people. You've got soil that looks compacted. It looks like somebody took a tamper and went through there and tamped the soil down. This is a natural response. And what happens is once all of that top loose stuff blows away, and then you get rains, and then the soil compacts, it becomes like cement. And then you end up with this happening next, right? You have this massive amount of erosion going into our streams and creating all of that runoff and problem. And we're losing all of our topsoil. Now, a gardener is, the reason I brought that up is, one, so you'll understand it if you're listening. And two, a gardener's not going to have that kind of a problem, right? You're not going to have a metric ton of soil blow away out of your raised bed garden that kind of has some guide rails in it all, but you're going to get that compaction. And it amazes me how many people end up with that compaction in their garden, and they don't understand where that compaction comes from. And it's because you're either doing like rototilling, double digging, and you're also letting your garden go through some portion of your season. And most gardeners are probably going to let that be winter, and there's good reason for it. I understand not everybody's going to garden through the winter. I don't. But what you end up with then is very denuded soils. You have a lack of control, and the only way to deal with all those weeds that come in is going to be some form of tilling that you might not even consider tilling, right? I'm going to go in with a broad fork and pull all the weeds out. That's better.
Nah.
But you're still going to end up with, this is going to be your result, right? And so if you were to use a cover crop, which is so inexpensive for a gardener, you know, I actually give in my course, I don't know how far you got through it, but I give in my course, like, how to do the conversions based on per acre down to the square footage of a garden. And you end up with like a 4x8 bed will cost you like 70 cents to put in like a massive diverse cover crop mix through your winter or through your summer if you're letting one rest through the summer. And so does a gardener need to do it? No. Would they be better off for it? Would the see, that's what I want to frame it is, what would the ROI be? And it would be like 1,000%, right? Because what does a tomato cost? What does a pepper cost? I mean, like, at least organic, let alone what we can grow in our yards, right? But that high quality produce, what's a mixed bag of greens cost per pound? So if your yield goes up 10 pounds a bed of mixed vegetables, what's that worth relative to 75 cents? So what I'm trying to help people understand is how they can produce more for less, and then what's the cost of your inputs? You know, for all this talk of all I use is compost. Most people, when they say all they use is compost, unless they're making compost like I make or you make, they have pretty poor results. You end up with some level of having to bring in some other inputs. Well, that costs money too. If you can cut that, even if you can't eliminate it, if you can cut it in half, you cut that bill in half. And, you know, we live in a society right now where things are expensive. I do well financially. I really do. I don't want to brag or anything, but for the last 15 years of my life, I'd say for the last 25 years of my life, I haven't thought twice when I'm in the store and I want to buy like a couple of ribeyes or something. I don't know, whatever, grab it, get it. And in the last 3 years, I'm like, do we really need that? Or is there a way I can do that for less? Like, so if I'm feeling it, I feel like other people are feeling it.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and then Jack, to your point, to these people that are bringing in these outside inputs, I mean, we looked at every single bag of compost you can buy at a store, even the stuff with all the fancy.
You can lose that presentation for now if you want to.
I'm sorry?
You can get that off the screen if you want to for now.
Okay.
So that they can see you and me, and yeah, because you're all cool and shit, you know.
No, that's how we roll, bro. Yeah. No, I look cool because I got these Superman glasses on, man. I'm talking
about Clark Kent, man.
Yeah, hey, don't make me take these things off, bro. I'll fly across this room. Yeah, I'm gonna drop kick this light out of here so I don't look so ugly in all these highlights in the studio. But no, bro, we've checked every bit. Folks, this is why I'm so excited about having Jack on this program tonight. And once again, hit that thumbs up if you haven't already and tell everybody what's going on, because a lot of what we're dealing with right now in Western North Carolina, as far as the remediation, is already in the wheelhouse of everything he's taught, and courses that honestly, I think he ought to be charging 5 times as much for, because I've been through Dr. Elaine Ingham's course, and I've openly stated, you don't hear me promoting that course. It's not because it's not a good course. You hear me promoting Jack's course every time I get a chance on the podcast, because he basically does what you do in the military, where you're like, well, how do you train somebody to jump out of a plane in 3 weeks? How do you train somebody to, fly a helicopter or whatever in 6 weeks? I mean, Jack has basically distilled a lot of this stuff down into these courses that are very inexpensive. It's the best value for the money. That's why, like I said, I mean, you can go out there and spend $5,000 and take Elaine's course if you want to, but you're going to learn everything. He's going to give you the cliff notes in his courses, and his compost course. Folks, I'm not even going to lie. When I was going through his compost course, I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. This is all of the important stuff that I learned from Dr. Ingham for when I say about 1/50th of the cost.
The compost course is $40 and hers is $4,000. So
yeah, I mean, it's insane. What you offer and what you teach. And folks, that's why I wanted him on here so bad, because right now, to remediate what we have going on in Western North Carolina is going to require the highest quality fungus rich, I'll just say it this way, at least a better than a 50-50 fungal to bacteria ratio of compost. We're also going to need cover crops. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. He came out with and then also he's done his version of a biosuit, his version of a Johnson. Help me out here, Jack.
Johnson Suit bioreactor.
Johnson Suit. I don't know why I keep saying this thing backwards. Yeah. But all the things we need to remediate what's going on here in Western North Carolina are all things that he has taught and things that he's teaching. But guess what? It also applies in your garden. So going back to what you were saying regarding compost, is we've tested every single thing you can find in a bag. And I don't care how good somebody says it is. If it came in a bag, we've looked at it under the microscope. It is not good at all. And you've
circumvented. It might have been good when they put it in the bag.
No, it wasn't. In fact, when we look at it under the microscope, here's what they're doing, Jack, is that they're hitting it with a nematode extraction or infusion. And so that's like putting a bunch of lions in the Serengeti with no gazelle.
Yeah, they're going to die. They got to eat. I mean, even if it is okay when it's first made, you stick it in a bag, they put it on a pallet. It's not food. Nobody's going to sue them because they ate it and died. So then they throw it on a pallet. They throw it in the back of a truck. It's 150 degrees in the back of that truck. It goes 3,000 miles across the country. It dries out. It goes hydrophobic. Yeah. Like every single person on this call, if you've ever bought stuff in a bag, you've bought stuff that you're like, that feels really dry. And you stick it you try to use this potting soil. You stick it in a pot and you pour water in it, and the water just pours out the bottom. You're like, it's got to be soaked now. And you look at it and it's basically inert. It's not even wet. You can't get it wet. You have to soak it to get it wet. Well, what's happened is all the organisms that were in it went into survival mode when it dried out. They exuded biogels, kind of like the frogs do in the desert, where they put the little thing around them. But they can only survive that way so long. And so you've got dead, inert. You might as well have sand when you buy that kind of product. There's no call for buying that stuff unless you just need fill. Right? That's all you're buying is fill. Don't spend money on biology unless there are some people doing it right, like what's his name, John Kempf.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Biological people that are specializing in the biologics. Some of those are doing really great work. But if you're going to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, or ordering 5 bags of shit off Amazon, you're buying dead. You might as well just go across the street to your neighbors and pay them for buckets of dirt out of their yard. You might be better off.
No, you would. And then to that point of John Kemp, I mean, I just sat through a class of his up at Polyface, and I'm telling you what, man, the guy is so freaking wicked smart, man. It just scares me. And, he was doing a class, believe it or not, on the very topic you're talking about right now regarding cover crops, and specifically in your pastures, forbs. Everybody wants to get rid of all the forbs out there in your pastures. And, the forbs, the benefit of the forbs is that they're running a taproot so doggone deep. It's what is basically anchoring everything together. So when you have one of these extreme weather events like we just had here in Western North Carolina, but everybody wants to worry about the top zone, instead of the things that go deeper, they don't use cover crops. They don't do any of that stuff. That's when you have these massive catastrophes because there's nothing anchoring anything past the first zone in your soil taxonomy. I mean, so that's where your work and all the work you have been doing really, really comes to bear right now. But Jack, let's go ahead.
That presentation back up for a minute on what you're talking about there.
Absolutely.
I've got a good slide for you. Right there. That's what you want.
Bam.
That's what you're looking for right there.
Bam.
And we might get into the rest of that slide later. I just wanted to get that image up. If you look, not only do you have deep-ass taproots, right, coming from that beautiful Helantheus thing there, which is a sunflower, but you have a mix of root types and density. I mean, I've had, I can't think of his name now. The guy does Zach Smith, the stock cropper guy.
Right.
I've had him on, and he talks about how he's had fields when they cover crop them properly, and you go drive a tractor across them, it doesn't even make a dent. Like his neighbors can't plant because it's too wet, and he can plant. But it's if you only have, I don't care what those roots do. I don't care if they're deep or shallow. If it's only one kind, you're very isolated. There is no monocropping in nature. And we have to get beyond thinking about monocropping only with plow and plant ag. Monocropping a pasture is no better. Monocropping a cover crop is slightly less bad because at least you're doing something instead of doing nothing. So like the number one cover crop used by farmers in the country is winter cereal rye, right? And I don't think that's a great thing to do, but the yields that they increase with even doing it half butt, right? It's still way better than what they would have otherwise. But you want what you see right there, guys.
Yep.
You want multiple different root types at multiple different depths, mining minerals, right? You hear about dynamic accumulators. Comfrey's a dynamic. They're all dynamic accumulators. They all dynamically accumulate something, right? And where is it in your soil profile? If you have a mineral deficiency in your topsoil, but you have subsoil full of it, you need something that can get down there and process it, interact with the microorganisms, and bring it to the surface. So kind of earlier you asked me, do gardeners need to do this? And I'm back to, you don't need to. But I sent you a picture and a video right before we started. I was out in my garden walking the dog and all, so that I didn't have to worry about it while we're doing this. And I sent you a picture of freaking gagoots or Kakusa squash.
Yeah.
Right? They're 25 feet up my tree. Right. And I have no problem with using a little bit of like a good organic fertilizer. I didn't fertilize this year. The only fertilizer I used this year was on my transplants and squash and stuff and gourds and all. You don't do transplants, you just direct seed. So they got none. And that one that I showed you, Billy, that's 25 foot up the tree, it had to go 12 foot before it went up the tree. Right? So that's what, it's like a 35, 40-foot vine, and I've got 4-foot squash hanging 20 feet over the tree. My buddy David said if those fall are going to kill somebody, what an embarrassing way to die.
Yeah, no kidding.
This but I mean, there, right? This is what gets you there, is having this diverse mix of root types.
Yeah, this is, this is permaculture. This is old school Masanobu Fukuoka kind of permaculture, where there's no, and he's talked so much about, I love that book, One Straw Revolution, man, because he was using primarily one kind of cover crop, but it still stresses the point that the soil has to be covered with something. And that's what I love about what you got here. Yeah, in the perfect world, this is the most ideal thing, where you have different zones that are, and like John Kemp would also say, that it's each one of these things. The reason you want that diversity is for the very same reasons, is that it anchors everything together. We would have far fewer landslides right here in the mountains if many of us kind of took this dog to hunt. In fact, I will say that the only places that were unaffected were the only places where we had this invasive, or what some people want to call invasive bamboo. But that's a whole nother story altogether. So this guy here, let's see here, John Dalton Hendricks says, what about cover crops or soil retention around perennial plants such as blueberries? I know mulch is important, but what if mulch is not available to you 1 year or two?
Yeah, in fact, the problem with mulch, now, if you have 5 blueberry plants in your backyard, okay, you can mulch them. If you have a blueberry farm, right, if you're growing in any real quantity and you're in a perennial system like that, the cost of importing mulch is probably such that it doesn't make sense, right? It's too expensive as an input. And then there's the manual labor. Cover crop wouldn't be really the term that I would use, though it would function the same way. I would want to establish a good perennial mix of grasses and forbs in that system. I would want to use, instead of annual, I would want to use perennial clovers. I would want plants that people call weeds, like plantain, in that system. I would want a mix of perennial grasses in that system. And if there was any way possible, I'd want to pulse through some sort of grazer in that system. And if it's a big enough system and you can protect your plants, you could pulse through things like goats or some other ruminant or cattle or whatever. But like geese would be fantastic in a blueberry system with a carpet of perennial cover, because geese are like little cows, and a goose isn't going to do jack diddly to your blueberries. They might eat some when they're ripe, so you would just exclude them during your kind of harvest period. And that's kind of the role that I would go with there. Why go through the effort of bringing in this labor-intensive and expensive input? Do you see mulch in nature? No, you see nature's mulch and nature's covers. Right. And so that's the way that I would run a system like that. I would also, do your thing, Billy. I would get deeply into gilding some other productive things in there. If I would plant a blueberry bush, especially like a high bush blueberry where you've got kind of some space underneath it, makes it easier to harvest as long as your climate is, predisposed for that type of plant. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put comfrey plant, a comfrey plant, a comfrey plant, a comfrey plant around it, right? I'm going to circumnavigate that sucker with comfrey, and then I'm going to encourage the native forbs and grasses that are already there. And I might bring in just really small amounts of seed. It's amazing what you can do with small amounts of seed. If you don't have any plantain, somebody has plantain near you. It grows everywhere. It grows in sidewalks. Have them harvest a Ziploc bag of plantain seed. Spread that around. It's not really the same thing we're talking about in the course that we're mentioning and the main subject tonight, but it's the same principle. It's just that I don't want to have to do it over and over again. That is a perennial plant. That's a perennial system. The reason we use annual covers is so we can terminate them, which means kill them when we want that next crop to come in. In this instance, we have a plant that's very woody. It's a shrubbery plant, right? It's a shrubbery, if you know where that's from. And every Gen Xer should. And if you're not Gen Xer, ask one. They'll tell you what that's all about. But that plant it's not really competed with much by grasses and forbs, especially if we manage them. So I don't want to have to constantly replant for that, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And speaking of sense, Jack, before we move on, I want you to go ahead and tell everybody, because folks, look, I wholly endorse the courses Jack is putting out there. Like I said, you're not going to get better value for the money. And if you're wanting to know chapter and verse, and for all of the people that are local around here that sat through that Alan Booker thing that we had over at Mars Hill University the other day, if you want to know chapter and verse exactly what needs to happen, well, Jack has already provided in his courses that are honestly, I think he ought to be charging 5 times as much for what you get out of him. His compost course alone, like I said, will knock your socks off. Jack, tell everybody how they can, before we move on, because I got a whole list of questions here I'd love to ask, and I know a lot of people in the chat have it as well. How can they for a
marketer, I should promote my shit better. Homefoodsystems.com. Homefoodsystems.com is the website. And Billy, over there in the comments, if you scroll up a bit, you'll find one by me with a discount code. Tom and I have provided a discount. Tom's my web guy partner in all this. And we're given, I think he put 10%, and I copied and pasted. We're giving $10 off the cover crop course. It's not really percentage, which means it's a bigger discount, by the way. So, because it's an $80 course, you can get it for $70 right now if you want the cover crop course. The compost course, we're giving $5 off, so that takes it down to $35. And if you take those two courses, I don't mean to toot my own horn too much or anything, but you will know more than 99% of people who have taken a PDC about those subjects.
Yes.
Right? I'm not saying that it replaces a PDC, though. That is kind of where I'm going. I took a PDC with Jeff. I took a PDC with Ben Falk. I took a PDC with a gentleman named Bill Wilson in the Midwest. So I'm not saying anything negative about PDCs. I'm just saying a realistic understanding of things is people go to a PDC, they invest 2 weeks of their life. It's a lot of money. They go through it all. And yes, if you drop them off on a tropical island, they understand a freshwater lens on an atoll and they cannot mess it up. That's great. But they can't necessarily grow food in their backyard, right? It doesn't get into the soil science to the level that the gardener needs. And I don't get into the soil science to the level of Matt Powers does, because it's beyond, like, most people are not going to buy a microscope.
No.
I understand that. When Billy said, they train you to jump out of an airplane in 3 weeks, he was not exaggerating. In fact, he was underselling it, because you have 2 weeks of training. And then what's the third week, Billy?
That's right.
You get in the plane and get out, right?
Yep.
Like, so you get 2 weeks of training and then they throw you out of an airplane. And that is the mindset. I wanted you to understand it at a scientific level. I wanted you to understand it, honestly, at a collegiate level. But I wanted to redneck eyes it. I call myself a redneck hippie duck farmer. And I wanted to bring it to that level. I use a lot of analogy when I teach, because I think the greatest teacher that ever lived used analogies. So I'm not going to try to reinvent that wheel. And so that's how I teach. And if you take these courses, they will help you a great deal if what you want to do is grow in your backyard. And I tried to marry two worlds here. The best research in this is being done by people like Ray Archuleta, Gabe Brown, and people like that, and good people doing good work, even though they're in the state system of the NRCS, on broad scale stuff. So if you want the most cutting edge, latest information, you got to go there. But if you just leave it that way, the person with 10 beds in their backyard in a small orchard is like, I don't know what to do. So I tried to teach from that level and then break it down to the person that just wants a really active garden and orchard or a food forest to be able to use it. And at the same time, Billy, we have a problem. We have a lot of permaculture people very excited with Messiah syndrome, right?
Yes.
Like the first time I found out about libertarianism in the early 90s, I got Messiah syndrome. I was like, if everybody finds out, they'll become a libertarian just like me. No, they won't. And you go off and you start spouting this stupid nonsense. When you go talk to a 66-year-old farmer, which is the average age of a farmer in America, and you start telling him how stupid he is and how everything's wrong and you don't need anything except X, Y, and Z, he's going to tell you to go screw off. When you tell him it's wrong to monocrop and you don't know what crop insurance is, and you don't know that the reason he monocrops is he can't get crop insurance without it, and you don't know the reason he plants the week he plants it because that's when the crop insurance company will insure it, and you don't know if he doesn't do all those things, he loses his farm, then he's not going to listen to you. So what I want people to be able to do is not only to do this and prove it works, I want you to be able to have conversations with a farmer and speak their language, their way, in a way that they'll understand, because then maybe what they'll do is they'll break off a small plot and they'll start that conversion process. And if they'll do it, they will become believers. We have farmers right now in the Midwest, up in like Indiana and all, that are part of like, it's not Gabe doing it, but he's affiliated with, because Gabe's out in South Dakota. I can't think of the gentleman's name now, but it's an older farmer, been around forever. He really did a lot with beef, but he now has like all these kids that are coming of age. You know, they come up in FHA and all that, and their parents own 2,000-acre farms or whatever. And the parents are like sending them off to school to go do something else. There's not enough money out of that farm to bring them in as an income, right? And pay them a salary. So they send them away. Well, he's got these kids being given like an acre or two by their parents, and they're growing mixed vegetables and stuff like that. And once a week, he loads everything up in a truck and trailer and takes it to restaurants in Chicago. And these kids are making more money than their parents. Often, the parent has 400 acres, the kid has an acre, the kid's making more profit than the parent. But that can't happen if you have dumb conversations with those farmers that don't understand their needs, that don't understand their struggles, and don't understand you cannot take a 400-acre field that's been conventionally farmed for 40 years and just stop. Like, you know that, Billy. But most people don't. They think that because this stuff works, it works everywhere all the time. It doesn't work at that scale without significant effort. And that's why you have people like Gabe Brown and you have people like Ray working together. They're going out, and their whole philosophy is you meet the farmer where he is. If I can take you 1% in the right direction, I'll take it as a win. And then maybe you'll take another step, and maybe you'll take another step, and maybe I can get you to where I want you without putting you out of business. Because it's not an instant process. It can't be done that way. And we have too many people out there talking BS to these people who know more about farming than you ever will. Because when you grow your garden in your backyard, you're not a farmer. You're not. right?
Jack, that is, you're hitting on something that I've been arguing for years. Everybody gets a PDC and they're told to go out there and evangelize this information to everybody. And look, we got a saying in the electrical trade: the only thing dumber than a first-year apprentice is a first-year journeyman. And that's what happens when people go through a PDC. I basically view permaculture as a mixed martial artist or a decathlete. Okay, so you got 10 events in the decathlon, and you got a coach for each one of those events. And that's the way I see permaculture, in that, okay, so let's say, okay, folks, let's say you got your PDC, which I think everybody should have as a backbone. And I think you should take more than one, like Jack was talking about. Like I did, I did a couple of them as well, one through Jeff Lawton as well. And because you're not going to remember it all. I mean, there's no way. And it's always cool to get somebody else's perspective.
Yeah, every teacher's different, right? So every permaculture design course is different.
Right. And then as you teach these things, you learn it again. But the problem is, people get the PDC and they stop right there. I think that is a profound mistake, because at the end of the day, okay, so you got a guy that you have 10 coaches in the decathlon at the very least. You have maybe 11 when you consider an overall coach. Okay, mixed martial arts, you got a wrestling coach, you got a boxing coach, you got a grappling coach, you got a coach for, you got a dietitian, you got all these different people. And that's where people like Jack come into play, folks. Your PDC is not the end all. It gives you a framework to know what questions to ask. And then you go out there and get specialized training. Okay, so you know what? There are certain things in permaculture that I'm probably exceptional at. But you know what? When I want to get drummed up on how to go out there, if I want to go out there and figure out how best to run my animals, guess what? That's why I went to Greg Judy's school. Yep. That's why I went out there. Yeah. If I want to learn how to go and be really good at doing a food forest or a permaculture orchard, that's why I went to Canada and learned under Stefan Subkowiak. If I wanted to learn, so folks, you see where I'm going with this, and this is where somebody like Jack comes into play, where he's offering you, honestly, the discount of a lifetime. And by the way, for anybody that's asking, no, I don't get anything out of this. And if it were offered, I wouldn't take it anyway, because honestly, I'm also one of his students. I don't get anything out of this outside of learning my craft better. So when iron sharpens iron, where Jack may learn something from me, I'm definitely learning something from him. I mean, it's where we cross-pollinate, forgive the pun, but that's exactly what we do here. But folks, if you think you're just going to do a PDC and that's the end of your education, then may your chains set lightly upon you, as Samuel Adams put it. So
a PDC is like an architecture course, but it doesn't mean that you can build a bridge or a building. You're going to have to go into specialties then, right? And like, I don't care how much I know, and I know a lot. I can go out and I can lay out swales across a broadacre system tomorrow. And I can do it conventionally. I can do it in the modified. It's kind of a keyline modified way that Mark Shepard does it, because I went out and worked in the field with him. I don't think there's anything you can do better than take these people that are really good at something, like you're saying, and go work with them. But if I start putting in earthworks like that, and then I get to a place where I'm going to put in, like, let's say a 4-acre dam, and there's anything sketchy about that system, I'm bringing a professional engineer that might not know anything about permaculture. I want him to check my mathematics.
Thank you.
I know how much water's in that hole, and I know what happens if that dam fails because I did something wrong. And so we need to have some humility. Like, having a PDC does not mean that you can't do something in 2 weeks. I don't care how smart you are, and be able to play with these forces and really feel confident about it. That's why kind of where I'm going with home food systems is I'm trying to create what we're calling a PPDC, a practical PDC. So that if you think about how when you go to college, you take all these courses, and there's required courses and there's electives, right? And I want people at some point to be able to, so like I'll say, these things are required because I think you really need to know them, and then you pick and choose. And when you have those 80 credit hours, like 80 hours of a PDC, then you get the full overriding certification instead of the individual certification. And I want to do that so when a person's done with that, you could send them out and have them do something. I come out of the communications world, as you know, and I had a certification called an RCDD, and I had 2 sub-certifications. One was an OSP for outside plant, and one was a land certification for local area networking. And it was valuable. I won't put it down. It was very much like a PDC. It was actually harder. It was like 2 manuals this big. It had like an 80% first-time test failure rate. It was pretty tough. But I can tell you that there were people that took that, had RCD certification. And if you said, here's some plans, here's a bucket of jacks, here's some cable, go do this, go put in these 5,000 data voice drops. They could design it, but they couldn't do it. And that's the practical side. I want people to be able to go out and grow food for their family and feel good about what they're feeding their family. And I want them to be able to deal with problems. Like, I get this question all the time. I'm sure you do too. Jack, I just found this great place, but there's a conventional farmer right next to me. They're upgrade for me, and their toxic gick is running onto my land, and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, yes, you can. You can plant a couple layers of deciduous, trees. You can biochar that, and then you can put high-quality compost on that, and you can stop that butt cold. That's what I want people to know how to do, so that when they go out and they're like, this is the best piece of land I can find for the money I have, but I have this problem. If you know how to solve that problem, then you don't need to tell the person you're buying the land from that you know how to solve the problem. You can now use that as a negotiation, right? You can negotiate that. If you mentioned solar and being an electrician, well, you can. People say it takes 20 years to get a return on solar. No, it doesn't. You can get a return on solar in one day. You know how? You go buy a piece of land that has no access to grid power, and then you put solar on it. And then you say, what would that land cost if it had access to grid power? And you just paid for your solar system the day that you put it in. That's the kind of mindset I don't teach solar, but that's the kind of mindset I'm trying to teach.
But bro, that's what's so beautiful about what you have in your course. I mean, and the way you design them is that even if a person doesn't have a PDC, let's say, okay, look,
you don't need one.
I got limited funds. Look, I just want to know how to garden. I want to know how the cover crop goes into it. I want to know how to make composting. Everything. What I love about your courses and the way you're going about it is that for anybody, no matter where you are in that continuum, whether you're an experienced person that's been at this for years, or whether you're just right out of the gates, or you're saying, look, this is all I want to know. Well, your class is definitely sufficient for all of the above. And I don't care where you fall in that continuum, but don't think, folks, that you have to have a PDC. I want to make sure I'm clear about that. No. You don't have to have a PDC to have any of this make sense. He breaks it down in such a way to where I don't care where you are, you will understand it. And he does a masterful job. I mean, there's not a whole lot of teachers out there or communicators that do better than Jack. I mean,
I want people to have what you're seeing in this picture right here in your backyard. One of those pictures I liberated from the internet because I wanted some diversity in it. So that assassin bug in the center is not mine. But that tobacco worm or tomato hornworm that's covered in those wasp larvae, he was from my backyard 2 years ago. I didn't kill him. Why would I kill him? He's propagating trichogama wasps, right? And then if you look over on the right, you see that little spider there? Those are my favorite spiders. These little black with red spiders, these little jumpers. I have millions of these things on my property. If I'm spraying chemicals, I don't have these guys. You see what she's doing right there? She's whacking caterpillar worms, right? Or cabbage worms. Belly, when I put that picture online, you know what people ask me? Well, what do you do about cabbage worms? I'm like, what do you mean? What? Like, she's mummifying one. I went back. I lifted that leaf up. I took that picture. I went back 2 days later. There was none of those guys left. She ate the ones she wanted, and she, mummified the ones that she wasn't ready for, and she packed them in the ground for her babies. There's nothing for me to do there. You can see they ate that leaf some. I don't care.
That also requires elimination of our reductionistic worldview in the Western culture, where we think, oh, I got a cabbage worm problem, instead of saying, no, I got a lack of spider problem.
You got a lack of spider problem. You got a lack of praying mantis problem. You got a lack of general predators. Now, the reason this isn't a cover crop course is that I plant a tremendous amount of flowering plants. And one of the things I've heard from people is why, I get doing cover crops in the winter, but I don't really get it doing in the summer. Well, I don't really cover much in the summer, but you could. You could, if you had a very large garden, let's say you had 12 beds, you could take 2 out of rotation every year, and every 6 years you would have a cover through there. You could plant some beds that are designed to be using basically cover, but really more floral predator attractors. What I do is I interplant. So I interplant. In fact, I'll go to the last slide here. I'll give this away. Just don't try to use the code we gave you. This code won't work. This was for another presentation. We did this one. But right there, you can screenshot that, guys. That's all the plants that I cover in the course. I'll give it to you for free. Because, if you want the course, you want the course. I want you to have the information. But if you look at that Sweet 16 flowers, those are the flowers that I use. And like, I'll give you guys that first one listed, Phacelia. That's one very few people know about. That is an incredible plant. It's just a little tricky with the timing as to when you plant it. It's a cool weather flowering plant. Billy, it's not a legume. It fixes nitrogen.
Wow.
It's deep tap rooted, and it flowers these beautiful little like furry looking purple flowers. And if you have that plant, it will swarm bees, bumblebees, mason bees, wasps. I mean, they all love it. It's so heavy, not just in nectar, but in pollen, which a lot of your predators that like, to come in and pollinate for you as well, they want pollen more than they want nectar. Pollen's protein, nectar's sugar.
That's right.
And protein that's why, that's why you have problems with things like yellow jackets invading your beehives, because they want protein. Protein is do you want, Billy, would you like a shake or a ribeye?
Well,
you want the ribeye, right?
Yeah.
You want that ribeye. So do they, right? They want the protein. So those flowers right there, alyssum, nasturtium, calendula, borage, sunflower, blue salvia, partridge pea, lupins, zinnia, phyllox, cosmos. Those are the plants that during my summer, everywhere there's a space, there's a flower. Why don't I have to weed? There's no room.
Thank you.
Marigolds.
That's
I grow more marigolds because they're low and they branch out. I've got marigolds still in my garden. We're in November. Like, they look like they're vining. They're not, because they don't vine, but they're like spilling over the sides of the beds. And I plant those extensively with my peppers. Peppers are like one of my go-to plants. I don't actually eat a lot of calories from vegetables. I'm very carnivorous as a person, but peppers are one of my go-tos. That's one of my most important crops. Well, I let those peppers get up till they're like, 18 inches high. And then I go and I interplant marigolds with them. And I don't do that for pests. I don't have any pest problems with peppers anyway. But what happens then is those marigolds get just high enough that they shade the lower peppers, and I don't get any sun scald. Because it's about 8 billion degrees. For those, I forget sometimes when I'm on air, since I'm on for myself so much, there's people here that don't know me. I live in north central Texas. I live just north of Fort Worth. Like, in the middle of my summer, hobbits come and throw rings in my backyard to get rid of them. That's how hot it is here. So you have this beautiful pepper. One day you go out the next day, it's just sun scalded to heck on the other side. When you give it that cover, it takes that away. And that's something like these types of things that I've actually learned by actually doing things. And I've done this in Texas. I've done this in Arkansas, more of like a Midwest climate. I've done it in Pennsylvania. I've done it in Florida. So I have a pretty, I haven't done South Dakota. I haven't done Oregon, but I have enough experience that if I tell you something works, you might have to adapt some things, but it's going to work for you. And if you use this list, you'll be, people will tell me, Jack, why don't you just tell people, why do you have it's like a 12-hour course on the cover crop stuff, as you know. Why don't you just tell people to make a mix and throw it down? Because when I tell people that, they're like, well, what, why, how, when, right? And those are good questions. And I'll show you that's actually part of what I teach in the course. If you want to figure this out, you need to understand your context. And so I give people, and I don't have time to do it here, but in the course, I actually teach people how to answer these questions. What do you want to gain from your cover crop? What are you planting next? When are you going to plant? What is your climate? What method of termination are you going to use? This is actually something you need to know in advance. How large is the plot? There's a big difference in 100 square feet and 100 acres, right? In dealing with what you're going to do. What time will the cover grow through? Not just when you plant it and kill it. What's the climate like in that interim? And what do you hope to gain beyond soil improvement? What are you looking for? Because soil improvement's one thing. Predators and pollinators are another thing. Reduction of erosion isn't really soil improvement. It's removing the process of soil removal, which is a huge problem we have as well. If you can answer these questions, then it will help you actually pick the right stuff. But more importantly, if I just said, here's a mix for summer, here's a mix for winter, I can do that. It'll probably work okay. You don't have any confidence. You don't understand why, and you can't adapt. And what happens if I say, even if I had give me your climate, give me your goals, here's the seed mix for you. What if I say, well, you need to plant it by November 1st, and you can't? because you're on the road for 2 weeks and you can't plant till Thanksgiving. How do you adapt to that? And so what I try to give people is the ability to make those decisions and have confidence, because you probably could go down the feed store, buy a winter seed mix and throw it in your garden and you would improve it, but you wouldn't get maximum result. And the bigger thing is you wouldn't understand what was going on, and you wouldn't be able to adapt to the fact that you couldn't do it at the exact right time, or you had to do it a little bit early. Or in my climate, I really want to make sure people have short growing seasons, right? Well, those people, they're like, I don't want to kill my main crop 3 weeks earlier than I have to, but I know that my winter cover needs to have at least, a lot of stuff will survive freaking 10 below zero, but it won't when it's just coming out of the ground. It has to establish. Right. Well, it's very simple. You interplant your cover and you let it come up while you're finishing your primary crop. It takes, a week or two to come up anyway. But people, I just feel that people don't have the confidence to go do a lot of these things until they get a full understanding of the why behind them. And it's kind of like playing chess against yourself. That's why I have this image on this slide. And I think the big problem is, when we really look at what people are doing, we're looking at 3 ways to break it down. And as a military guy, you'll get this. You have technique, tactics, and strategy. And what does everybody start with? The technique. You go online, you see me or Billy make a hugel mound. You go, look at hugel mounds are great. You go build a hugel mound. But it's not connected to anything else in the design of your system.
Right.
Right. And you don't need to water. Well, you might for the first year or two. Depends on what's in that core. How big is it? How is it designed? Does it have any catchment? How deep is your subsoil? There's so many variables in that. Tactics are short-term actions for immediate goals. So that's how you implement the technique with an understanding of why you're using that technique at that moment, right? Buddy move, buddy fire, right? Buddy cover, right? And then strategy is your long-term planning for your overarching objective. Everybody starts at technique. The place you should be starting is your strategy. Your strategy might sound like, this is actually my strategy on my property when it comes to the cover crop issue, right? Annually using diverse covers to increase soil health, water retention, biodiversity to combine for long-term garden sustainability and productivity. That's my strategy. Now I can tactically implement my techniques, if that makes sense. And until I break it down that way, it's very confusing. Now I'm back to asking Jack or Billy, what cover crop mix do I put in? And what Jack or Billy want to do is empower you to pick your own cover crop mix based on your goals this year. So we have to teach you how to develop your strategy first. And your strategy should sound a little tiny bit like a venture capital proposal. Not completely, because then it's just BS, but it should sound just a little bit like that. That means that you've actually thought about what you're trying to accomplish. And now you can tactically implement your techniques. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think I don't know that there's anybody able to weave a tapestry the way you do, Jack, as far as bringing all this stuff together and making it make sense. But I just love the fact, whether it's your composting course or whether it's this course here, how all of it, one leads into the other, and all of them matter, folks. I mean, they matter in a big way because, like I said, right here in Western North Carolina, where we've had PVC plants that have dumped into the river, everything Jack's talking about right here are the things that we are bringing to bear. I don't know that anybody out there in this space has talked more about the very things we need to remediate what's going on here. And, right at the end of the line, whether it's the compost that we got to start with the extract, ultimately it'll be teas, but we'll put the compost teas on there when the cover crops basically start doing their thing. Whether it's the biochar, which he's covered extensively. You name it, every single step of the remediation process that has to happen here in Western North Carolina. That's part of why I wanted him on here so badly. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect or unfortunate for us here.
Yeah.
But I mean, the problem is the solution. So, and you're helping to bring that here.
And I think biochar needs to be part of that. I have a almost 3-hour presentation on biochar. You guys can find on my YouTube channel. If you just go there and search the channel for biochar, you'll find it, that I did as a podcast. But I'm actually developing the course for that now. And that will probably be more in depth than the cover crop course. And I probably won't charge any more for it. I think $80 a course is going to be kind of my top. I want people to be able to afford this. I know you should charge more, but I want more people to have access to the information.
No, I agree.
And I do well economically. I don't need to try to I do want, part of it is like my buddy Tom, who runs all my web stuff and all, like doing these courses, I was finally able to key him in on like a portion of my revenue and help him. So I want to build it as much for him to get some freedom as I do for myself. But I want people to be empowered with this information. And like this slide right here, this is like a perfect example of every problem we have is painfully obvious if you know what to look for. So if you look on the left side of your screen right now, and again, for those on audio only, I'll describe it as best I can. It's rows of corn in Texas. This is I just pulled over randomly on the side of the road about 5 weeks after corn was planted. It's about 2.5 feet high. And what's growing in the middle? Can you recognize that plant, Billy?
I can barely see with these glasses on, bro.
Yeah, I know you're like me. You need the glasses for long and you can't see short. That's spiny amaranth. Okay, and and the picture on the right is actually wild lettuce, but they have a very similar deep taproot. Okay, I can tell you that when you plant corn after you've plowed in this climate, you're going to get spiny amaranth, or you're going to get lamb's quarters, or you're going to get wild lettuce. And the reason you're going to do that is that soil is going to compact, and it's going to compact. It's going to happen. And when you compact soil, nature says, "Ooh, there's a problem." So what does nature do? It sends in something to correct that problem. What corrects the problem of compacted soil? Deep taproot.
Yep.
When you have loose soil, if it doesn't blow away and it doesn't compact right away, what are you going to get? You're going to get hairnet style weeds are going to come in to hold it together before it blows away. This is not hard. They have made this hard. If you look at this slide here, if you look at the right, you see a road that was just paved. On the left, you see where they've made the road base ready to pave it. Do you know what they did before they got it? They compacted it. They plowed it with a disc plow because it kicks off our strategist bacteria in the soil. They go ape shit. They eat all the carbon. They eat all the organic matter as fast as they can. They reproduce like gremlins after midnight with water dumped on them. And they do that in the highway business because you don't want living things under your highway. They will die, they'll decompose, and the road will settle. This is basic engineering 101. Then we tell the farmer to plow the field. So the highway engineer knows I can use the plow to destroy life, and we turn around and tell the farmer to use the plow to encourage life. Again, we're doing everything wrong, but the big thing I want people to take away from this, don't go telling farmers they're stupid. They're trying to survive. They're trying to get by. We can fix these problems, but this transition takes time. It takes a deep understanding of what's going on so that if you want to be the person that goes out and evangelizes, you want to have these conversations, you can talk to these people in their words, their vocabulary, and make them understand you. Because you're not going to go out and tell a farmer to stop plowing and have them listen to you. But what you can do is say, what if you didn't have to plow? That's a totally different approach. And what if we only took an acre to see what it did, and give it to your kid? And when that kid starts making more money, then he might pay attention.
Well, that's the problem when you're well adjusted to a sick society. Apparently we have, that seems to be the real problem when you're well adjusted to a sick society, as we are in the United States of amnesia. What do we got on the screen right here, Jack? I can barely tell.
What happens when we plow? This is what happens when we plow. So these are NASA images, right? So they're not exactly people that want to say that climate change isn't a problem or whatever. But the date on the left is 4/5/2006. So this is, April, early April. That red is the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Over on the right, where there's very little red, that's June 15th. Well, June, that's when all the CO2 should be super high, right? That's when everybody gets out of school. That's when everybody goes on vacation. That's when the airplanes are flying double routes, right? Where'd it go? Where'd it come from? What you're looking at, what does everybody do in spring? They plow. You plow, those bacteria go to work, they release that CO2. If you're worried about CO2, number one thing you need to do is stop plowing, or at least minimize plowing or reduce plowing. I believe most agricultural systems, once every 4 to 5 years, can handle being plowed. And if you do it right, it can actually be of benefit. But, plowing twice a year, which is what most people are doing, this is what you're doing. I am not worried about how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. We've had way more in the atmosphere. CO2 is plant food. I am worried about the fact that it's not in the soil. See, that's what I'm worried about. I can disagree with somebody on that issue. We can still have the same goal. What do you want your organic matter content to be in your soils, Billy?
As high as possible.
As high as possible. But you're probably shooting for like 5, 6, 7, 10%, right? A farmer on 500 acres isn't going to do that, but we can get them to 2 to 4.
Well, if you're Gabe Brown, you can do it. I mean, you can do some pretty
years, but you can get up into those numbers. But do you know that if we got every acre of farmland, I'm talking just conventional farmland, to 2%, that would take 100% of the CO2 in the atmosphere that man has produced in the last 120 years. And we need it. And like I said, there's only one place to get it, right? Other than mining it and then putting it in the soil and releasing it in the atmosphere, there's only one place to get it. We can't make carbon. You can't do it. Like, you can make all the compost you want. All you're doing is playing with carbon. There's not more when you're done than when you started. It doesn't work that way. It's a mineral. It's an element. It only can be made from lesser elements in a star or a fusion reactor. I don't have a fusion reactor in my backyard. Do you?
No, but I mean, at the end of the day, we can't. I mean, if there is some way, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that to think that somebody's just going to turn on a dime, if they're accustomed to this plowing system, or as Jeff Lawton says, our farming systems are more akin to mining than they are to actual farming. This isn't going to happen overnight. But like you said, to go from just 1%, like we often talk about, that just adding 1 more percent is the equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool per acre of the water that you can store in that soil. That's just with 1%. Not even talking about the carbon capturing.
Well, I want to hit one thing for people here that we really haven't hit on yet, and that is, where does the organic matter in the soil come from when we cover crop? Because that actually fits with this slide.
Sure, let's cover that.
Right?
Yeah.
Most people think you grow this big cover crop, and then you terminate it. You crimp it, you flame it, whatever. You put it to the ground, you tarp it, and you make it die, and you plant into it. Great. And they think that beautiful natural mulch you've created is what improves the soil. It helps a little bit. It feeds microbes. Worms come up, and they help break it down. And the worms are actually eating the microbes, not the waste. The microbes are doing the breakdown. But most of it actually off gases. The improvement in the soil is the root you left behind because you didn't till it, and it was a slow breakdown, and the fungi get involved with that, right? Like, there's certain principles we want to maintain with regenerative agriculture, and one is we always want an armor on the soil, and the other is we want a living root in the soil as long as possible. And that is going to actually build that organic matter in the soil. The plant, while it's alive, is literally pumping carbon into the soil. But when it dies, it's left what Jeff calls fast carbon pathways. Mm-hmm. Well, they're not pathways until they die. And then that's consumed by soil organisms. And that's what's going on. And without that, what we get is runoff. And that's what you see in the slide. This is horrific level runoff. This is also in a place where they've instituted a requirement that along streams that farmers put in riparian buffers, and they have to be, I believe in this area, it's 100 foot. So from 100 foot from the stream, you can't, so about 30 yards, you can't plow, you can't plant, you have to have trees and shrubs. But look what's going on here. Well, because there's a 40,000 acre field over there, and a 100-foot strip can't infiltrate that amount of water, right? It's about, I think it's 27,000 gallons per acre per inch is your rainfall coverage. It's roughly that amount. Well, do the math times 40,000, and how's that going to happen? And look at that picture. It's not just running across, is it? It's literally coming out the side of the bank, eating the bank. So that farmer's losing field, even though he's got to have a 100-foot standoff. Next year, he's got to move that standoff back. If he had put in a cover crop and he had those pathways and he had that decompacted soil, that water would go in the soil. If he had organic matter content of 2-4%, then it would hold on to that water. And then he wouldn't be in a drought situation 4 weeks later. They go from putting tiles in the field and pushing the water out, which is probably part of what did this, to I'm in a drought. Well, you just had, monsoon level spring rains. Where'd all your water go? It's gone. And it took the soil with it. What's our number one export, Billy, by tonnage? I tell you about this.
Soil.
It's soil. We export more soil by ton from our country than any other 10 commodities put together. Most of it goes down the Mississippi River. And then it creates a dead zone the size of the state of Delaware. And for those that have never driven through Delaware the long way, it's a much bigger state than you think it is. The Delmarva Peninsula is freaking big. But that's about how big the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico is. We have another one that happens every 4 or 5 years in Florida, in the Sanibel, Fort Myers area, and another one kind of north of Miami on the other side from the 2 rivers that come out of Lake Okeechobee, right? And this is all from this type of thing, and this doesn't have to happen. We don't have to have this happen. It's not easy, but it is simple. And it's simple in that we know what to do. It's not easy because the people that are responsible for it are not bad people. They're not trying to destroy the planet. They're trying not to go bankrupt. And there is a delicate balance of transition that they have to go through to where they actually can stay profitable during that transition. And without profit, they're dead in the water. And then Bill Gates buys their farm, and then it's going to be nothing but corn and soy forever, right? Until it's mined into oblivion. And we're like 40 harvests away from that point right now, which is 20 years. So if you care about your kids or your grandkids, at least start in your backyard.
All right, Jack. So that brings me back to let's go full circle here, because I mean, I know there's a lot of questions here. We're not going to be able to get to them, folks, because I'm going to have to get bouncing here in a minute. And I know I want to be respectful with Jack's time. But Jack, while somebody's going through this course, I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question, but let's say, like, we got a person here says, does this course cover growing in containers? But let me also ask, does the student have an ability to ask you questions that maybe maybe there are concepts that are just pretty tough for them to grasp? I mean, do they have a way to get to you?
So we built the whole system on a WordPress suite of plugins called LearnDash that's used by major universities. I should say Tom built it. I just do the content. And one of the things that we added, that we paid the money to get the software to add, is a thing that does 2 things. One, it's a notes plugin for the student, so they can take notes as they go. They stay with their course. They can access it anytime they want, and they have all their notes. In that notes plugin, there's a little box. You tick that box, and it says notify instructor. I answer those every day. And if it's a weekend, you're not getting an answer till Monday, but Monday you'll get an answer. And I answer every single one of them if you tick notify instructor. If you don't tick notify instructor, I just assume it's your notes, and I'm not in the habit of reading all my students' notes. On the question about containers, I would tell the person it's all containers, you probably don't really need the cover crop course unless you want the information. What you really do want is the compost course, because the best potting soil you will ever make in your life is take my compost and throw about 10% biochar at it. And you will make potting mix that you cannot buy. You've seen it, Billy. It looks like Terra Preta. And I'm not going to say it is, but it's what it looks like. And I actually have a way to go before I would say that it's, even close to an equivalent, but it's very good. It's not just good at growing. I did an experiment when I started adding the biochar to the compost. It was a pretty simple experiment, but it's pretty revealing. I took a whole tray of my plants, and these are not little tiny 6-packs so I'm not over exaggerating, but basically I make potting pots out of Solo cups. Like when we were kids and we went to the woods to party and you paid $2 for a kegger, those Solo cups. And I use a soldering iron to make holes in them, because that way there's no plastic residue in the soil. Okay. And then I make that potting mix and I fill it, maybe an inch from the top, because it's still a resource. I don't want to use more than I need. And then I put my seedlings in there, and those are my transplants that I put out. And so what I did is I took like a dozen of the same plants, so 2 dozen, and one I used my compost with biochar. And the other one I used really good potting soil, Fox Farms, Ocean something. That's like all the microgreens guys use that. But what I did, it wasn't which will grow better. It was which will survive longer without being watered. So you got this little pot, it's under grow lights, it's going to dry out pretty quick. Without the biochar and using the Fox Farm stuff, it was about 4 days it looked sad, and 5 days it was dead, like it's not coming back. It took 2 weeks to kill the same plants with my compost and the biochar in it. Wow. Because it held on to the water for so much longer, and the microbes were and I literally let them die. It was kind of hard. They were like pepper plants, and I just planted more, and it was kind of hard watching them go, but like going, well, when are you guys going to give it up? And it was about 15 days versus 5.
Wow.
So it was a 3x increase in longevity without irrigation in a completely closed environment because it's in my shop. Like it can't get rain. Now, for a plant to live 3 weeks without water in a solo cup, if you're doing containers, what else do you want?
Bro, that's pretty impressive.
It kind of hits this slide I brought up right here, like almost like I had clairvoyancy or something. People don't, if you want ideal soil, do you know what it is? It's 25% water, it's 25% air, and it's 50% soil, dirt, organic matter, or inorganic, subsoil. That's what it is. Now, it's never going to always be that way. Like water levels are going to go up and down, but about half your soil profile should be empty space. That's how plants want to grow. And part of it is because of this right here. Let me see if I can find that slide. Where is it? I'm not Randall Carlson. I can't just know what slide I need. Right here. Which one of these roots are, even with your glasses, right? Which one of those root systems are healthy, left or right, man? Right? You don't want your plants, and these are hydro roots. Actually, they're aquaponics roots from my aquaponics stuff. But if you look at those plants on the right, those are sick. And that's because the roots are gummed up. You look at the plants on the right, they're beautiful white roots. If you were able to dig that plant out of the ground, you could see that same result even in a non-aquatic system. You need the airspace for that plant to be able to breathe and interact with the soil organisms. And if you have compaction, you're going to have root systems that look like that. Which one of you, they're both exposed to a blight. Which one's going to get hit harder? The sick one, right? It's already sick. When it's hit with a pathogen, it's going to get sicker faster. Who died from COVID? Healthy people like you and me. We got a runny nose. We coughed. We went on with our lives. I've had flus way worse than COVID, but it killed some people. There you go, right there. And I don't mean to mock anybody that took it hard or anything. Like, it's not your fault. You could be sick from something else. You didn't even not take care of yourself. But our plants, we need to give them every advantage. And giving them that space, the air, the microbes, the nutrients, the water, and the space to put those roots in. That's what cover crops does. That's what biochar does. That's what compost does if we build it right. And I picked up something recently on biochar from a biochar expert. The size of the holes in biochar is a perfect size for hair roots of plants. They literally fit in there so they can get in there and they can interact with those microbes and pull that water out. Cool. And so that's why my first 3 courses are, I did the compost, then I did the cover, and then I'm going to do the char. So 3 C's, compost, cover, and char. And that's the base of everything that I'm going to teach.
Well, it's the base of everything we need to remediate what's going on out here, folks. I mean, I told you he would not disappoint. Jack, one more time, tell everybody how they get a hold of this course. And folks, you would be, honestly, I'm taking the course. I mean, I was at least until we got pulverized out here with this storm. But yeah, tell everybody one more time how they can get a hold of it.
So you can go to homefoodsystems.com and there's a page with all the courses. And what everybody should know here, if you're like, I don't know if this guy's all right or not, I have a course there called Principle-Based Permaculture Design. It's about a 5-hour course. It's free. All you got to do is you got to register for the site to get in, and it's free. And we don't spam you. You might get once or twice a year an email from me that says, hey, do you know we have these other courses? That's about it. We certainly don't hit people probably as much as we should. So you can take that, or you can take the cover course, or you can take the compost course there. You can use the discount code. I'll drop that in again. It should still, that's there. And if you want to, Billy, you can go ahead and put that up on the screen so that they can get a hold of it. And you can take the course there. But I also want to hit something like Shield Maiden here says, my garden is very high in clay. We're going to rototill thoroughly. It's hard to even dig sometimes. If you tilled it the first time you planted it, I would not slay you or be mean to you or whatever. But I could tell you that you probably don't need to. If you'll learn how to make the kind of compost I make or the kind of compost Billy makes, and you do as little as make a good compost extract and spray it, and you let microorganisms get going, and then you plant deep tap-rooted things that we would use as cover. In winter, we might use like daikon that can get down in there, or turnip, which will be much higher up in the soil profile. But mixing those two brassicas, and then include some deep or some heavy-rooted plants like white oat, like Caius white oat, and maybe a mix of Caius oat and like triticale. You can break that soil up, get worms working in there, and you don't need to till it. If you till it, it will work until it doesn't. It will go right back. I don't know how many people have had clay soils. They go out and they make them beautiful. Winter comes, spring comes back around, and it's like it's worse than it was the first year. Even if you till, you've got to get the biology in there. I bet you wherever you live, where you have this clay soils, there's woods near you. They have the same clay soils. Go dig a hole in the woods. It won't be anything like it is in your backyard. Get the biology working. Get these spheres of the soil here, the detritosphere, the drillosphere, the rhizosphere, the agratosphere, porosphere. Get those things functioning in your soil. When you look at the top of your soil, I don't care if it's clay, it's loam, it's sand. When you do these processes right, it should look like cottage cheese. It should be little clumps. You can't make that structure by tilling it, not permanently. That is made by biogels from microorganisms and from fungi working together that cause those particles to stick together. Why does clay compact? Because the particle size is small. That's why. That's
right.
The entire reason. So how do you get it to not compact? You don't chill it up and let it go back. You haven't changed anything. You haven't changed the structure. Right?
That's right. The only way to do that with clay is to flocculate it. And I mean, it sounds like a bad word. You were flocculated. The only way to do it is letting your microorganisms flocculate that clay, basically making it permeable.
Yeah.
And if you try to do it any other way, you're always going to have, like Dr. Elaine always talks about, you're always going to have that bottom part of your tiller that is always going to make a hard pan. That's why a hard pan every single year goes deeper and deeper and deeper. They need deeper plows, which means they're going to create more compaction, which means we got the same problems over and over again, folks.
If she doesn't have time to do cover this year, I'll give you a real simple thing. The place where you want your beds, go out there and throw down like some old feed or something to just provide some feed for microorganisms. Throw a mulch on top of it and throw a tarp over it for the winter. You'll go out there in spring, pull that tarp off. You'll stick your hand you go at least 6 inches down. Do that 2 years in a row. You'll stick your hand in there to your elbow, especially if you start cover cropping it, composting it, and doing that. That's your short answer to that problem. Because if you're in that bad a situation and it's November, you probably won't be able to get a good solid cover crop. And in my compost takes a year to make. But if you just get a hold of some good compost tea or extract, spray that, feed it, mulch it, cover it, lasagna it, and that will get you off the ground. And you will never have to, why buy a tiller when you could buy like everything you need to start your own plants for the rest of your life with the same amount of money? All the lights, the shelving, everything, right? And now you're empowered for the rest of your life instead of addicted to a tiller for the rest of your life.
Jack, we were teaching that very same thing in a video. Now, I mean, over the last couple of years, we just did, Jeff Lawton's Instant Garden, which is basically lasagna gardening or sheet mulching, whatever you want to call it. And we basically just in one little spot, like, okay, if you want to do this, the laziest, you're never going to put my name and lazy in the same sentence, but I was like, okay, let's go ahead and do this. So instead of going out there weeding and putting up another crop every single time, whether it was summer, fall, you name it, all we did was just put a new one over the old one. If you did nothing but that, bro, we took ground that was hard as woodpecker lips. And inside of one season, 6 months, Jack, 6 months, we are just doing basic things, not weeding, not doing anything else, going out there with cardboard and mulch, and it would blow your mind how quickly the things will turn around just by doing exactly what you said. And it works, and we've done it a long, long time, and it doesn't have to be difficult. But folks, if you want to go out there and learn from the best, I'm telling you what, man, I'm going to tell you right now, Jack is a fantastic instructor, and he's one of those rare minds out there. He's never going to tell you this, but he's one of those guys that's highly intellectual, but at the same time, can use his hands as well, because a lot of times you'll think you'll come across a person in this space that can intellectually work.
What they're saying is right. They're not wrong, but they don't have any practical side.
Right. They don't necessarily put their hands on it. I've known so many engineers out there in this, like in the electrical world. Yeah, you can draw it up on a sheet of paper like you were describing a minute ago, but then when it comes to, hey, I need you to go out there and put it together, well, they have no understanding of. Jack is that rare combination of somebody who can do all of the above, and I feel lucky to know him, y'all, and you should feel lucky that you had him here tonight. So folks, go check out his course, get that discount The Pimpcast cover crop 10% with BPC cover. Look, we're going to leave it all in the show notes below. And I know, look, we don't get a whole lot of, I didn't expect to get a giant crowd tonight on YouTube tonight because the majority of our audience comes through the podcast.
Yeah, it's selection night too. Everybody's watching Fox News or whatever. I will say this. I see a lot of questions over there. I need to wrap too. This is my 4th show today. Right? This has been a long day because I'm doubling up because I'm off next week because I have my workshop. I'm going to have like 80 people on my little 3-acre farm for a week. So I won't be able to put out shows next week. So I have to like pre-do them. So I do need to go, but I need a show for like tomorrow. And it probably won't be enough by tomorrow, but I will say this, anybody watching this now or watching this, later this week, my email is jack@thesurvivalpodcast.com. Again, jack@thesurvivalpodcast.com. If you have a question that we didn't hit tonight, send me an email at that address, put TSPC cover in the subject line. So I know it's from this. Give me your question. Please do me the courtesy. Do not go crazy with details first. I promise you, I'm a professional. You can make your question one sentence with a question mark. Ask me that question, hit return a couple times. I got bad eyes like Billy. When you be able to block a text like this, I can't read it. I delete it. I'm sorry. I have weaknesses too. But hit return a couple times. Give me some space in between the question and your details. Give me all the details you want after that. If there's enough questions that come in, I will do an entire episode doing nothing but answering questions that we created tonight. Because it kills me to see people with questions and not answer them. Like Billy can tell you, like I spent my whole life trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And 16 years ago, I figured out what it was. And it was something I considered doing when I got out of the Army and wanted to go to college. And that was being a teacher. And I found out being a teacher made me no money. And everybody was a teacher after 20 years was miserable. And so I went off and made a bunch of money selling stuff. Well, what I ended up coming back to is my passion. My passion isn't permaculture. It's a passion. My passion is teaching. I teach permaculture. I teach solar energy. I teach guns, right? I teach everything, guns to gardens, tactical, practical, and everything in between. And I can't shut it off. Right now, Billy's like, I got to go, man. I can see it, right?
No, it's all good.
Shut this off. This is who I am. And I will do everything I can to give as much information as I can until I'm dead, until they put me in the ground. Because this is the first time in my life that I've ever found the thing that I've done this long. I've never done anything longer than teach as a podcaster, except be a father and a husband. I've had jobs. I made tons of money, 4 years, 5 years. I can't do it anymore. This I can do for the rest of my life. So if you guys will send me that, Amy, I see the person that I tried to answer a question for, Shield Maiden, etc., asking questions, send those to me. I will do an episode just for you guys.
Well, Jack, you better hold on to your hat, bro, because this thing's going to go out as a podcast tomorrow. And that's exactly, provided people aren't too inundated with the nonsense that's going on in the world out there. But honestly, the podcast is where we got a large podcast. That's where our biggest audience is. It's not going to necessarily be on the live, but bro, they're going to absolutely blow you up. So be careful what you wish for. Jack,
I've got 3,600 episodes, man. I need content. I need more stuff to do. So send it.
Okay. Well, you heard it from the man himself, y'all. Like I said, as always, he never disappoints. Jack, thank you so much for being on, bro.
Thank you for having me, Billy.
All right, y'all. Until next time, stay alert, stay alive.
They don't want the individual, just a carbon copy. You spitting that manicotti, yeah, I'm talking saucy. All they want to build is a prison world full of pet Tamagotchis. The kamikaze got me out of body like I'm Goku SS3. They want to push me to the center like a cell. They want to spin up, but the center of the next is me. They want me to bow down, but I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior. I will never bow down, 'cause I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior. They want me to bow down, but I'm a warrior.